She was walking home when she saw something strange, a German shepherd dragging a heavy plastic bag down the side of a dirt road. At first she thought it was trash, but then she heard a faint cry. When she opened the bag, her whole world stopped. This isn't just a rescue story. It's about survival, sacrifice, and the unbreakable love of a mother. It was supposed to be a quiet morning. Samantha Rivers, 42, was taking her usual walk down Old Miller Road, a half-paved route that wound between fields and wooded lots on the edge of the neighborhood she liked. The peace out there, no traffic, no city noise, just bird song and breeze. But this morning felt off. There was a strange sound, plastic scraping across gravel, followed by a deep-labored grunt. Samantha slowed her pace. Then she saw her at the edge of a patch of overgrown weeds, just where the pavement faded into loose dirt. A thin German shepherd was dragging something behind her, a white plastic trash bag, heavy and tied tight at the top. It bumped and scraped as the dog pulled it by the edge with her teeth. The dog's body was thin, her ribs clearly visible. Her fur was matted and dirty, with patches missing along her back legs. She limped slightly, her back left paw barely touching the ground, but her eyes, they were locked forward, determined. Samantha froze. She'd seen strays before, but never like this. She reached slowly for her phone, but the sound of her movement made the dog pause. The shepherd dropped to the bag and turned her head sharply. Their eyes met. Samantha's breath caught. This wasn't a wild dog, this was a mother. She could see it in the way the dog positioned herself, half blocking the bag, ears pinned back, tail tucked low but alert. Something important was in there. Samantha crouched slowly, voice soft. "Hey, girl, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The shepherd didn't growl, didn't run. She just stared, and then she stepped aside as if giving permission. Samantha blinked, heart pounding. She took a cautious step forward, keeping low. The bag was torn slightly on one side, dirt clinging to the plastic. She reached down and gently opened it. What she saw inside made her gasp. 3 newborn puppies, eyes still closed, no bigger than her hand, huddled together, trembling against a ratty old cloth. They were breathing barely. One of them let out a tiny, scratchy cry. Samantha dropped to her knees. Oh my God! She looked up. The mother dog was watching. Unmoving, tears welled in Samantha's eyes. This dog had been dragging her babies, not abandoning them, saving them. Her voice trembled. "You brought them all this way, didn't you?" The shepherd gave a soft, breathy whine, almost like a whisper. Samantha didn't think twice. She took off her hoodie and gently lifted the puppies out of the bag, wrapping them inside the fabric. They were cold, too cold. She then turned to the mother. "Come on, girl, let's go." She stood, puppies in arms, not sure what to expect, but the shepherd followed, limping, slow but without hesitation, as if she knew she finally found someone who would help. But what Samantha didn't know was that this wasn't just about rescue. There was a reason the dog had hidden those puppies, and someone dangerous had left her out there to die. Samantha had never driven so carefully in her life. She'd wrapped the puppies in a soft towel and placed them in a small Cardboard box on the passenger seat. The mother dog lay curled on a blanket in the back, her eyes fluttering from exhaustion. The engine hummed as they rolled down the quiet suburban street toward her home. Samantha glanced at the rearview mirror every few seconds. The shepherd hadn't moved. "Hold on, Mama," she whispered, "just a little longer." Samantha lived alone in a modest two-bedroom house on the edge of the neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, safe, quiet. She parked in the driveway, grabbed the box of puppies, and then gently coaxed the shepherd out of the back seat. The dog stepped down shakily. Every movement looked painful. Still she followed Samantha up the porch stairs and into the house. Without protest, inside, Samantha laid out blankets on the kitchen floor. She filled a bowl with water and another with leftover chicken and rice. The shepherd sniffed the food, licked a few times, then collapsed onto the blankets. With a deep, exhausted sigh, the puppies whimpered softly in their box. Samantha placed them beside their mother, and immediately the dog shifted, licking them one by one. It was slow, tender, mechanical, like she was barely holding on, but she still had to be their mom. Samantha knelt beside Haru. "A good girl," she said softly. The dog didn't look up. She just kept licking, nudging the smallest puppy closer with her nose. That's when Samantha saw it, a patch of dried blood on the dog's side. She leaned in there, just behind her front leg, partly covered by fur, was a deep cut, jagged, swollen, and red. The fur was crusted with old blood, and the skin around it was irritated and raw. Samantha's stomach turned. "Oh God, you're hurt." She reached out slowly, hand hovering near the wound. The dog flinched. Samantha pulled back immediately. "It's okay, I won't touch it." But she knew it was serious. This wasn't just dehydration or exhaustion. This was an infected wound. She got up, grabbed her phone, and called the only person she could trust with something like this: Dr. Nina Collins, the local vet, and an old friend. "No," she said, out of breath, "I found a shepherd. She's got 3 newborns with her. I think she's badly hurt." "No, didn't hesitate. Bring her in now." 10 minutes later, Samantha was back in the car, the mother lying on a blanket beside the box of pups. At the clinic, Dr. Collins met her at the back door, eyes widening when she saw the state of the dog. "She's barely standing," Na said. "She must have been out there for days." Nina carried the puppies inside while Samantha helped guide the mother in. They laid her on the exam table. The light was too bright, the table too cold, but the shepherd didn't resist. "She has a severe laceration," Na muttered, inspecting the wound. "Probably from wire or glass, might be infected. We'll need to clean it and give her fluids immediately." Samantha stood by the wall, arms crossed tightly. "Can she survive it?" Na hesitated. "If we'd waited another day, maybe not, but she's here now. Let's fight." As Nina cleaned the wound, something else caught her. "I wait a second," she said. She gently parted the fur just below the wound. Samantha stepped closer. Nina leaned in there. Under a layer of grime and matted hair was something burned into the skin, a faint but visible brand, 2 letters. "RG." Nina looked up. "That's not natural. Someone marked her." Samantha's eyes went wide. "You mean like property?" Na nodded slowly. "I think someone owned her and didn't want her anymore." Samantha looked at the dog again. lying unconscious, wounded and still, curled toward her babies. Whoever had owned her had tried to throw her away. But now Samantha knew this wasn't just neglect, this was cruelty, and someone out there might be trying to cover it up. The next 48 hours were tense. The mother dog, now nicknamed Grace by Dr. Nina, was stabilized with fluids, antibiotics, and pain meds. She couldn't walk without wobbling, and her eyes remained half closed most of the time, but she stayed curled around her puppies, gently cleaning them, pulling them close with her paw. Samantha visited twice a day. She sat cross-legged beside the pen where Grace and the puppies rested, talking softly, watching as tiny paws twitched and little mouths suckled. "I don't know what you've been through, girl," she whispered one evening, "but you're safe now, I promise." Diana came in, pulling off her gloves. "She's fighting hard. That wound was deep, but she's got heart." Samantha glanced down. She was branded. Non nodded solemnly. "Not a ranch brand either. It looks like initials. Homemade." Samantha ran her fingers over the blanket on her lap. "I want to know who did this, where she came from, who left her out there like trash." Nor looked her in the eyes. "You really want to go back there?" Samantha's answer was immediate. Yes. The next morning Samantha drove back out to Old Miller Road, parking her car in the same spot where she had first seen Grace, dragging the bag. The wind was colder today, the road quieter. She stepped onto her heart pounding, scanning the ground there. On the edge of the grass she spotted the flattened path Grace had made, dragging the plastic bag through gravel and weeds. Samantha followed it, a trail of crushed leaves and disturbed dirt, led deeper into a small wooded area. Step by step she pushed forward. After nearly 5 minutes of walking she stopped at the edge of a dried-up ditch. She found it a pile of wet towels, old food wrappers, and a ripped-open bag of cheap dog food. The plastic bowl was still there, tipped over and dirty, and beside it a broken piece of wire fencing half buried in the ground, with blood on the tip. Samantha knelt, her heart tightened. This had been a makeshift enclosure, a pen. Someone had penned Grace and her puppies in this little space and then left them. She took out her phone and started snapping photos as she turned to leave. Something else caught her eye. A second trail, different from Grace's boot prints. They were deeper, larger, clearly from a heavy person wearing work boots, and they didn't lead away from the road. They led toward a farmhouse about 300 yards away. Samantha froze. The house was small, with a rusted roof and an old pickup out front. No visible activity, but something about it felt wrong. She zoomed in with her phone. A kennel behind the barn. She swallowed hard. Suddenly it all clicked. The brand, the wound, the enclosed ditch. Grace had escaped. She had dragged her newborns through that trail, across gravel and weeds, looking for help. Someone had kept her there. Someone still might be keeping dogs there. Now Samantha backed away, breath caught in her throat. She got into her car and drove straight to Nina's clinic. As soon as she walked in, her voice was firm. "Call animal control. There's more. I know it." Back in the pen, Grace lifted her head weakly as Samantha knelt down beside her. The puppies stirred. "I saw where you came from," she whispered. "You weren't just Dumped you escaped, but what Samantha didn't know was that someone had seen her there that morning, and they weren't about to let her come back a second time. 2 days later the knock on Samantha's front door came early. She opened it to find Officer Rare, a tall man in his 50s, with silver hair, a sheriff's badge clipped to his utility vest. Behind him was a young animal control officer named Lila, holding a clipboard and wearing a calm but focused expression. "You're the one who called about the shepherd?" Rayner asked. Samantha nodded. "Yes, her name's Grace. She's at the vet clinic now with her puppies." Rare glanced at Lila. "Let's go see where you found her." The drive to Old Miller Road was silent, tense. When they had reached the trail, Samantha guided them through the weeds, her heart pounding faster with every step. They reached the ditch. Lila knelt to inspect the torn bag of dog food, the bent fencing, and the dried blood on the wire. She didn't say a word at first, but Samantha could see it in her face. She knew this wasn't random. Rayner rubbed his chin. "And you said she was dragging a bag from here?" Samantha nodded. "Her babies were inside." Leah stood. "That's not a survival instinct, that's a dog doing everything she can with what she has." They followed the second trail. When they reached the edge of the open field facing the rundown farmhouse, Lila raised a pair of binoculars. Jason's truck was gone, but something was moving behind the barn. Rare tapped his radio. "Let's check it out." They crossed the field slowly, careful not to spook anyone. As they neared the barn, the sounds became clearer: whining, barking, metal clanking. What they found behind the barn made Samantha stop cold. 5 cages, each holding a dog, not a kennel. Cages stacked too high, covered in filth, barely large enough for the animals to turn around. Some dogs had missing fur. One had an open wound on its leg. All were silent now, staring at the newcomers with wide, vacant eyes. "Oh my God," Samantha whispered. Layla pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is a cruelty case, no doubt." Rayner walked to the barn door and knocked loudly. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Then he opened the door. The smell hit them instantly: rotting food, feces, urine, something worse inside. There were more cages, at least a dozen. Some were empty, some weren't. One dog was lying motionless in the corner. Rayner cursed under his breath. "This is a damn puppy mill." Samantha felt her knees weaken. "You mean illegal breeding?" Lila said quietly. "Low-cost sales, high turnover. They keep them until they can't breed anymore, then they dump them, or worse." Samantha turned away, holding back tears. Layla continued, filming. "WEC need warrants, but we'll report this immediately. We have enough to start an investigation." Rayner walked back out into the field to call backup. Samantha stayed near the cages. One dog, a trembling tan mutt with cloudy eyes, pressed her nose against the bars. Samantha knelt. "I'm so sorry," she whispered behind her. Lila spoke again, this time with a chill in her voice. "Wait." Samantha turned. Lila pointed at a wall inside the barn. A metal branding tool hung there. Next to it, a sheet of paper, on it a hand-drawn list of initials and numbers. Samantha stepped closer. She saw it immediately. RG next to it, G42L. Retired. Her heart Stopped, that's. Grace Lila nodded. Grimly, and she was supposed to be the next one. Out suddenly Raina called out from the front of the property. We've got movement. In the woods behind the house someone's running. Samantha and Lila rushed to the side. A figure in a hoodie was disappearing into the trees. Is that the owner? Samantha yelled. Rare grabbed his radio. Suspect fleeing westbound through the trees. We need backup now. Samantha's heart was racing. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was a criminal case. And whoever had done this to Grace was still out there. That night Samantha sat at her kitchen table staring at her phone. She'd barely touched her dinner. A half-full glass of water sat untouched by her hand. Across the room, the bond of puppies was nestled in a warm pile of blankets beneath a small heater. They were still so fragile, just over a week old. Now eyes barely open, they squeaked and stretched, their soft bodies moving instinctively toward each other for warmth. But Grace wasn't there. She was back at the clinic, and she wasn't getting better. Dr. Nina had called earlier that evening. The infection is deeper than we thought. We've started stronger antibiotics, but her body is very weak. She might not respond. Samantha had gone silent on the call. All she could do was nod, then whisper, please don't give up on her. She now watched the puppies sleep, heart sinking. They needed her not just for feeding, but for something deeper. They needed their mom to come home. A sudden knock on the door broke the silence. 3 soft taps, quick, nervous. Samantha blinked, startled. She stood slowly, crossed the floor, and opened the door just a few inches. Standing on her porch was a teenage girl, no older than 16. She wore a faded hoodie and jeans, with untied sneakers and dark circles under her eyes. Are you Samantha Rivers? The girl asked, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Samantha replied cautiously. Can I help you? The girl looked over her shoulder, then back. You're the one who found the shepherd, right? The one with the puppies? Samantha hesitated. Yes. Why? The girl shifted. Can I come in just for a minute? Something about her expression stopped Samantha from saying no. No. She opened the door. The girl stepped inside and looked immediately at the puppies. Her face softened, her eyes shimmered. I knew she'd do it, she said quietly. Samantha frowned. You knew Grace? She wasn't called Grace, he just called her G4. Samantha's stomach turned. Who are you? The girl pulled back her hoodie. My name's Lena. I used to help feed the dogs. She sat at the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. I was working there at the farm for like 2 months. I needed the cash. Samantha listened closely, every word sharpening her pulse. They didn't tell me what it was at first. Said it was just kennel cleaning, feeding, but then I saw the branding. The fights, the ones that got sick just disappeared. Lena looked up, her eyes brimming with guilt. I saw her. Grace, she tried to escape once before they punished her. That's how she got the cut. They tied her near the ditch with no food. Samantha's breath hitched. She's still protected her baby, Lena whispered. Even then she dug a little hole under the fence. I saw her leave with the bag in her teeth. Samantha said down across from her, hands shaking. Why are you telling me this now? Because he's still watching. The guy who owns it all, he saw you that day. He knows someone took the Dog Samantha's heart pounded. You mean he's been watching me? Lena nodded. He thinks you'll talk to the police. He doesn't want that. Samantha stood up, walking toward the window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. The street was empty, still, but it didn't feel safe anymore. Lena rose to leave. I just wanted you to know, be careful, and if the mom survives. Samantha turned to her. Tell her she was brave. The girl was gone. Samantha locked the door double, checked the back, then walked back to the puppies and knelt beside them. She reached into the blankets. Their tiny bodies were warm, soft, but one of them, the smallest, wasn't moving. No, no, she whispered. She gently lifted it, still limp. She placed her fingers on its chest and waited. Nothing. A single tear slid down her cheek. She wrapped the little one in a cloth and held it close, but just then her phone BT buzzed. "Nah," she answered, voice breaking. "She's not." Knock voice was steady. She opened her eyes. She's lifting her head. "I think she's fighting back." And just like that, hope returned, but so did danger, because someone out there was planning to make sure Grace never left that clinic alive. It was just past midnight when Samantha sat up in bed. Something wasn't right. She wasn't sure what woke her. Maybe a sound, maybe just a feeling, but her chest felt tight. The room was cold, too quiet. She slipped out of bed and tiptoed down the hallway. The puppies were sleeping in the box by the heater, all three. Now only three. She looked at the smallest one now, named, and gently touched his paw. Still breathing, she sighed. Then she noticed a shadow outside the window. Samantha froze. The shape moved slowly, cautiously. Someone was in her backyard. She backed away from the window, heart racing, grabbed her phone, dialed 911. "What's your Emma?" "Mercy, there's someone outside my house. I think they're watching me." "Are you alone?" "I have newborn puppies inside, and I think it's connected to an animal cruelty case. I reported. Officers are en route. Stay inside. Do not engage." But the moment she hung up, she heard it, the back gate creaking open. She moved fast, locked the back door, turned off the hallway light, grabbed the flashlight from the counter. Then she crept into the kitchen and looked through the back window. A figure was near the fence, tall, wearing a hood, but something in his hand glinted. A crowbar. He wasn't just watching, he was coming in. Before she could scream, the porch light flicked on motion sensor. The man froze, and that's when her neighbor's dog started barking, loud, furious. Then another porch light clicked on, then another. The figure took off running. Samantha ran to the front of the house just in time to see him jump into a dark pickup and disappear into the night. Her hands were shaking as she locked the door and backed away. 10 minutes later, Officer Rare arrived. He took a statement, walked the property, and made note of the tire tracks. "You were right," he said. "This wasn't random." He handed her a folded piece of paper he'd found near the back gate. She opened it. It was written in red marker, "Don't let her live." Samantha felt the room spin. Rayner kept his voice calm. "You said there was a brand on there dog, RG." She nodded. "Well," he said, pulling out a small notebook, "we just found out those initials match a gnome breeder Ronald Grant used to operate out of Oklahoma. Went underground after a federal raid. Last year why would he come here because if that shepherd survives she's proof. She's there. Link Samantha was silent Rainer. Continued we've already dispatched a unit to the clinic she won't be alone but Samantha couldn't rest not yet. The next morning she drove straight to the vet clinic holding Milo wrapped in a towel. When she entered Diana looked up. Eyes red. She had a seizure last night. Samantha's knees nearly buckled but she's still fighting. Na said we've up the meds and she opened both eyes. This morning Samantha sat on the floor beside Grace's pen, placing Milo gently next to her. The tiny pup wiggled forward and nestled into her fur. Grace didn't move much, but she let out a soft exhale, a sound of recognition of peace. That's when Na walked over with a clipboard. There's a vet in Oregon, a sanctuary they take in cruelty victims. They have round-the-clock care, open fields, rehab. Samantha looked up. You think she should go? I think she deserves it. Samantha looked back at Grace, but as she reached to stroke her paw, Grace's eyes fluttered shut and her body tensed. Na rushed forward. The monitor started beeping. Grace's breath hitched once, twice, then stopped. Na grabbed to the oxygen. Come on, girl, stay with me. Don't give up now. Samantha held her breath. The machine went flat, but just before Na reached for the paddles, a small sound broke through a breath. Grace's chest rose again, slow, weak, but alive. She's not done, Na whispered. Not